Welcome to Geek Warning, the podcast that puts the world's most interesting cycling tech into one place. I'm Dave Rome, I'm back, and joining me this week, Bradley Copen. How are you doing?
I am also back, and I'm doing well. Thank you, Dave. It's good to hear your voice again after a few weeks.
Yeah, I missed this. Yeah, so I guess maybe I'll keep a secret of where I went, or maybe not, but I saw the Northern Lights.
Yeah, I mentioned that, and then I didn't know if I was supposed to or not.
Yeah.
I only mentioned the Northern Lights myself. I didn't tag you further, so let's keep them guessing.
Yeah.
The truth will make itself apparent, I imagine, when the embargoes lift.
Yeah, so part of it was I had traveled across the world to test a new bike that's coming out soon, and decided, given I traveled across the world, I just wouldn't come home for a few weeks. So made a little vacation out of it and stayed on, which was nice. So, but yeah, now I have a bike to write about. So more on that probably next week at this rate. Brad, how's the shop going?
Shop's going well. Shop is busy. I am entertained on a daily basis, and we're able to really focus on doing the best we can and sort of the way the bike shop is structured. So it's no time pressure. It's the pace I like to work at and the thoroughness that I like to work with, or I guess that'd be the right way to say that. But yes, I get to do it the way I like to do it. And so I like that, needless to say.
Yeah. Anything in the stand in the last couple of weeks that stood out as exciting? Exciting,
not like terribly exciting, but it is, and I'm sure this will reveal itself today and in the future. It is going to be a never-ending source of topics of conversation for you and I to enjoy on this podcast. So, any time spent in the bike shop is entertaining one way or another, and enlightening and revealing. And so, depending on what you're seeing, you might be exposed to this or that. But anyway, here, this is bringing up perhaps more content than we even have podcasts to discuss it on. So we'll see. But nevertheless, keep listening, and I'll be sharing.
The introduced compromises of the bike industry reveal themselves while working in a shop.
Yeah. Yes. And today, Greg, my counterpart at the shop, and I were discussing actually last week's podcast, which, if you were listening, Ronan was discussing the Bike Matrix, which is not a cool movie, but in fact, like a database of information that is sort of an industry shared tool, which will elucidate the compatibility or incompatibility of bikes and parts in your own bike, and parts you may or may not want to put on it, and sort of how that all works. And then, but Greg and I were sort of lamenting the fact that, what the industry shares or states as compatibility, as it might with things like torque values and other things, are not actually always the case. As, for example, SRAM revealed when its torque values were not adequate to secure its own hoods to a handlebar, which is maybe more what then the bike mechanic still might supersede the matrix at the end of the day when it comes to what's truly compatible or how to truly go about doing things. So, but with AI being the forefront of technology these days, I'm sure we'll all be obsolete in much less time than we think we will. So we're enjoying the ride while we still can.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, that software could be very helpful, but yeah, it's going to need very consistent updating, and dare I say, it'll never be finished. So, which is perhaps a scary thing to say, but yeah, it's just the reality of things, and the way compatibility is often more and less than what brands themselves claim. So it's interesting product though. Brad, should we cover some tech news that's come up in the last week or so? So top of the list is Mavic actually have a new carbon road wheel set, Cosmic S42 disc, which is just US $999, which is not Mavic, and under $1,000 for a carbon wheel is not something I had expected to see. But have you had a look at these?
I have had a look at these. It's I wouldn't say in person, but I did take a look at the materials and read the reviews or the spec sheet, and it kind of is a very checks all the boxes type of a wheel set. The price is great. The depth is like a kind of average or sort of semi-aero depth, so nothing that's
42.
unwieldy in the crosswinds and such. But it looks potentially like a pretty solid option for Mavic. And I kind of Mavic sort of fell off my radar there for the last couple of years, and only
they fell off everyone's radar.
Yeah, including their own, I think, for a moment. But under some, I guess, new ownership, they've reemerged from the ashes and have had a few new products come out, including this very affordable wheel set. And it shares the S moniker that Campagnolo is also tagged on to its Super Record group. What does it mean? What is this S? Sport?
Sport.
Sale. Yeah, it's on sale.
Yeah.
They're on sale. They're for sale.
They're definitely for sale. Yeah, so some other details of this, like it's 1,660 gram claimed weight for the pair. It's a 21 millimeter internal width tubeless hooked rim, which all good there. And I guess my question to you, Brad, is are Mavic hubs any good these days?
I don't think
because they had some
good
problems.
Yeah. The last sort of, especially this price point, the last, kind of generation of Mavic wheels that I was seeing were kind of cheap, let's say, heavy, cheap, and maybe prone to creak if you want to almost make a rhyme out of it. I had some that were creaky at the spoke interface at the hub, and some that were like a shell that was bonded to flanges that would also develop some creaks there too. This is obviously not the same hub, but I wasn't blown away by some of the last offerings from Mavic. So I'm hopeful that this is a slightly better interpretation. But for the price and for what they're offering, I think your expectations should be in accordance with that too.
Yeah. Yes and no. Mavic have a reputation of being pretty good in terms of durability over the years, and I think where Mavic, I guess, left off from my memory is like they had some pretty bad hubs. So I'm keen to see how these perform, and I think given the price point and all, I'd dare say that we might even call some in for a review and try figure out how good they are. So
I was intrigued by their use of they self-describe as UST tubeless compatible, which is a term I haven't heard in 20 years or something, and it was a mountain bike rim last time I checked. But what we thought that was going to mean was that it had an internal rim chamber that had no spoke holes drilled through it, rendering it tubeless. And I was somewhat, I don't know if I was disappointed or not, but it's essentially, it is drilled through, there is rim tape, and it's tubeless that way, but it is hooked. And maybe that's kind of what they're using to...
Yeah, I think UST refers to their sizing and dimensions these days. Anyway, one to watch.
Yeah, we'll see. Do a review and let us know, Dave.
Yeah. All right. I'll try get something in. Also on the new list is Pivot have updated the Volt gravel bike, which is Pivot being a mountain bike brand and the Volt being their drop bar bike, I guess, of choice. And they've kept some familiar features, namely they've kept the little elastomer seat tube insert that sort of isolates the round seat post from the frame, and it's designed to provide a small amount of vibration damping, I guess. But otherwise, it's pretty much an entirely overhauled frame, like all new geometry, much wider tire clearance, got a storage hatch. It ticks a lot of boxes as far as things we've discussed, Brad.
You didn't mention that UDH, but it has
Of course
one.
It has a UDH.
Yes. Yeah. So put that in the win column for Pivot. That is a forward-thinking renovation to the frame or to the model. This frame also curiously has 5 water bottle mounts, which I find to be incredible.
Just angle
on the front triangle and underneath the down tube, but still on the front triangle. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Of course, if you have 4 in the triangle, you can't remove a single one of them if you are using a conventional bottle cage, but side loading only. But anyway, it's an amazing picture, and that was the thing that I sent to Dave before anything else to all our listeners that I found most entertaining. But probably more relevant, I would say, tire width enhancements, lower BB, slightly longer top tube for most, if not all, frame sizes, slightly longer with the intention that you would then obviously therefore run a shorter stem.
Yeah.
Plenty of integrated storage for bags and or fenders and or racks.
Yeah, so
What
it's
am I
also got
missing?
they've increased the stack height by about 20 millimeters, so trying to make that a bit more accessible as far as the fit goes.
Mm-hmm.
They've added a 6 frame size. But yeah, I mean, really it comes down to there's now clearance for 700 by 50 tires and all the water you could ever want to carry.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But yeah, good looking bike, interesting bike. It's not exactly a cookie cutter replica of kind of every bike that's come out lately, so it's at least kind of has some interesting innovation. But yeah, the ISOFlex, that's like you say, the elastomer, it's sort of a flex, or like a managed, controlled flex built into the seat post / seat tube interface with a bit of a rubber interface that I guess adds, shall we say, damping to it rather than just a post flexing inside of a...
Questionable, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. I said I guess because I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that one. But not unlike this kind of similar design that Specialized uses on the Roubaix and the Diverge. You know what I'm talking about, Dave, where it like kind of clamps the seat post low along the seat tube of the frame, and it allows for like the fore aft flex of the seat.
Yeah,
to give it like some give, some
different approach, but kind of trying to achieve a similar outcome.
Yeah, like without adding an actual pivot, ironically, but give it some element of suspended rider, rather than just a rigid post. And I think they mentioned, I'm not sure if this was an update or not. I think it was also that they offer a 30.9 seat post compatibility on this new version.
Oh, okay.
To allow for an expanded range of dropper post options.
Yeah. Compared
to the previous, which was just 27.2. So we were pretty limited there. And you still get some of the flex, ISOFlex benefit, they say, as well. So,
well, anyway, yeah. This bike is. I know James Wong reviewed the previous version at Cycling Tips, I believe it was, and I think he quite liked this bike. So these updates look promising, and on paper it looks like a pretty solid update. So perhaps another one to add to the review list, and we can say that given that the Escape team has grown by 2 tech editors since I was last on the podcast. So it's the capacity is now there, which is exciting. Next on the list, I like this one because it's free. Wolftooth have a tire pressure app, which is kind of largely focused at off-road use, mountain bikers, gravel riders, and that's a cool thing because the pre-existing tire pressure apps we would recommend, which would have been like the Zip one or the Silka one, arguably really optimized for road use and perhaps not as good for, they're decent for gravel, but certainly not great for mountain bikers. So yeah, Wolftooth having a pressure app is a nice thing, and it's got some cool features. It's like it'll ask you sort of like the temperature that you're inflating the tire at versus the temperature you expect on your ride, and sort of adjust recommended pressures accordingly. Which is neat.
I like this because it does, if nothing else, although the reviews of it that I've read, I haven't used it yet personally, have been very good, and for those who are experience in the ways of tire theory, reflective of kind of what you would hope. So in other words, giving realistic feedback. But what it does do, at least for like the more advanced option, which includes like your loaded rider weight and the things like Dave mentioned would include temperature. It does maybe to those who are less experienced with tire setup or tire theory, it kind of exposes you to some of the variables you may not have been considering yet
for sure.
When anticipating what pressure to set your tires at, especially if one that jumped out at me or really kind of educated me was the both suspension and tire pressures that we would set the bikes up at Cape Epic, which is a stage race in South Africa, a mountain bike stage race, where you start quite early in the morning, and then by midday the temperatures maybe have increased 30 degrees Fahrenheit. A lot. So so we had to kind of anticipate that. So that's something to think about, and it's a cool thing that this tool from Wolftooth kind of may help you understand the scale of things better by kind of taking all these variables into consideration and spitting out a number, so you don't have to kind of guess and try and check and guess again, that kind of thing. So it gets you really close to where you should be right out of the gate, and that's a cool tool, especially if you're exploring a different type of bike than maybe you had previous experience with, or you have a new wide rim and new wide tires on your new bike equipped with the clearance for such, and you don't exactly know where to start. Seems like a pretty thoughtful and well executed tool to help you get there, I would say.
So thanks, Wolftooth. Speaking of tire related things, Brad, have you ever ridden a Brompton?
No, I haven't. Well, yes, I have ridden one around that have come in the shop for service, but never in like not on purpose, really.
Okay, so Brompton, pretty iconic brand. I mean, they've been making effectively the same folding bike out of Britain for, I believe it's more than 30 years at this point. It could even be 40. Anyway, it's been a long time. And they've kind of stuck to a very familiar design, like 16-inch wheels, rim brakes, and I guess changed materials and gear options and stuff along the way. But there haven't been too many significant changes. But this is how trendy gravel is now. Brompton have released a gravel bike, and it's got massive 20-inch wheels with custom tubeless tyres, and it looks kind of fun.
Oh, I'm sure it's a hoot. I'm sure it's a hoot. I mean, they are fun to ride, and there is quite a cult following of Brompton enthusiasts, and then like upgrade, components that are not Brompton branded, but are Brompton oriented, and people really go all out on like building up the lightest weight, most Gucci Bromptons, and it's sort of a funny thing, but it's quite a sub kind of niche in the market that I don't spend a lot of time thinking about, but when I cross paths with something like this, it really does kind of make me laugh a little bit, and I do enjoy it. And so, it's hilarious, I think. But these are also folding bikes, if you don't know. So they all collapse up into, something you can very easily like stick in the back of your car without any fuss. And so it's quite a design to be able to do all the things it does and tuck in the way that it does when you're done.
Yeah, so I think this is really cool. Like, obviously, I don't think it's going to replace a legitimate gravel bike anytime soon, but it's, I mean, if you want something to travel with and you're perhaps going to encounter more than just a pure urban environment, then this might be a really, really neat option. It's obviously going to be larger once folded than typical Brompton, but Brompton G-Line, check it out. But yeah, gravel is here, even into folding bikes. Brad, do you want to tell me a bit about this dumbass backpack thing that is going to be on Kickstarter soon?
This was something that I swore had to be a joke.
It seems that way.
Do you remember the saddle with the little shark fin that sort of helped you center it up your butt? And it's sort of like the backpack equivalent of this product, both of which I thought were jokes, neither of which are jokes. They're real. This is a backpack from a company.
They can be real and they can be a joke.
Well, this is that, because it looks like a shark fin. It is massive, like the sail on a sailboat. It's from Ram Air Fairing, RAF. It is a backpack that is intended to enhance your aerodynamic profile as you ride with a very spacious, capacious backpack. That doesn't carry anything. It doesn't carry anything. I think it carries a little bit. But primarily, I think so. I think it
integrated airbag protection.
Yeah, it has. It's inflated, or it inflates itself. From being ridden. It looks like a plastic bag to me, and but it has enough structure that it sort of creates a slipstream behind you that helps to channel the air off of you and away from the bike and away from everything, and somehow is claiming aerodynamic gains, but it looks silly.
Yeah.
Shall we
it looks
say.
exactly like if anyone has ever seen paragliding equipment with the backpack they wear that they kind of sit into.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, almost like a wing.
Exactly that.
Yeah. It's hard to believe that anyone would ever take this seriously, but if you like the sound of this, it's on Kickstarter now, looking for funding to go into production. And if you at least look up Ram Air Fairing backpack and have yourself a laugh.
Yep. There is no way this passes UCI approval.
No.
Like, there is no way that UCI is going to allow this to be used. So
this is purely for the thrill seeker out there.
This is for the person looking to cut a minute out of their commute.
Yes, on your 20-inch Brompton. Yeah.
Anyway, I think we've discussed this enough. It's absurd. Yes. It made me laugh. It made much of the internet laugh. But yeah, if you feel like wasting some money, then jump on Kickstarter and support it. That is a very harsh thing to say, but I don't know what else to add. Sorry? Anyway. All right. Well, that's all that's on the news front. Brad, I know you've got something on your mind this week from being in the workshop and watching a bike go into a travel case. So I think we're going to merge on our mind and a pick one into one thing. So travel cases. Brad, what happened this week?
Well, a lot of what we do on this podcast is sort of talk about what the industry is doing, and oftentimes we critique it, and sometimes we find faults and things that we would wish the industry might stop doing. And this is a nice combination of those things. Last week we discussed, well, almost every week we discuss internally routed handlebars in some capacity. This week, my coworker Greg's girlfriend is on a trip where she has to fly to 2 different locations with her mountain bike. She's not particularly advanced as a mechanic. She knows kind of the basics, but she has a Cannondale scalpel with an integrated handlebar and stem, which has sort of an opening in the handlebar where the housings enter from the controls and then run internally through everything. And so it makes one of two. Well, you basically have to take a lot apart to put the bike in a travel case. And so, we were sort of lamenting the fact that not everybody is mechanically inclined or maybe not have all the necessary tools. Oh, I should also mention too, this bike has a SRAM transmission drivetrain, and it also requires that the rear derailleur come off to go in the travel case that she had. And so again, that then requires a torque wrench with a 35 Newton meter. So a big torque wrench, not just your little handy kind of preset, as well as some knowledge of how to actually install that correctly to where the derailleur position is correct, which is all, it's a multi-step operation involving the cage lock being in a particular position, the gear that you're in being the particular one, and then holding everything in place while you tighten it to 35 Newton meters. And so, it's basically, we've created these bikes that are so advanced, but sometimes their purpose, which is to be raced and to be traveled around with to events, can become quite complicated, and maybe for some folks more than they might be comfortable with. And so that was the premise of all this. And that's then where we get to our pick one, perhaps, where we say, what is the best that we've experienced personally, or what would we choose given the fact that we all now have these bikes with all this integration and amazing functionality that requires quite a bit of disassembly.
Just to play devil's advocate with the disassembly of the rear derailleur that you had to go through, could you have just removed the cage assembly?
Maybe, but Greg was doing this, so I wasn't with him for that aspect of it. The nice part about the transmission is that the derailleur is that you can unwind essentially the pulley cage and just pull that off. So for sure, in some bags, it may have been as much of a width thing as it was a kind of fore aft, shall we say,
Gotcha.
like a length increasing thing, or it may have just dangled down a little bit too far where it didn't seem totally safe. And
fair enough.
So, but that all depends a little bit too on which bag it's in, and some bags have got the space or the kind of engineering, let's say, within them, like a frame that you bolt the bike to using its through axles, for example, which gives it some stability and structure and doesn't bounce around in there. So, but the front end has to come off, or the controls have to come off the bar, or something has to happen where you can't as easily pull the bar off the stem with externally routed housings and hoses that allow you to kind of fold things up nicely. So it's no Brompton after all. So with my experience on the Scott team, that was also a very integrated mountain bike that we had there. I preferred traveling with the Evoc bag. It's like the Pro XL bag, the largest one that they make. And I did have to pull the controls off the handlebar just to avoid pinching or kinking any of the cables. I had lockout cables as well as brake cables, hoses. All the cables, yeah. And unfortunately, when Axis came out, at least we didn't have. So, it's a great bag. It's the bag that I still use and I tell other people to buy. But even that one required some kind of what I would say extra disassembly compared to what we used to do, back in the good old days.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, that's mountain bike, like that XL bag. If you've got a mountain bike with integrated bars, the bigger the bag, the easier it's going to be to pack. What about for road stuff? I mean, we've got pretty much every new road bike has something integrated in the front end, and it's increasingly painful to put them in cases. I mean, in that case, I'm of the opinion that you should be trying to keep the handlebar on the bike. And there's kind of only 2 cases that do this well, which is like the Skicon Aero Comfort.
I said Sycon. Is it Sycon? I don't know. I just say that. I don't know if I'm right.
Sycon? Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
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 Anyway, one or the other, or something completely different. And the Evoc, I think it's called the Road Pro bag, is the other one that I've used, and that one is better. I much prefer that over the Skycon Skicon, just because the handlebar area is like really well protected and reinforced. Whereas that Skicon one has a reputation for, when it's on a conveyor belt, the baggage handlers will tip it upside down so it doesn't roll away. And then at that point, they're basically like kind of throwing the bike onto its hoods. And so it's not uncommon to have like hoods sort of like bent inwards with that case. Also, it doesn't protect the main frame all that well. So I've seen a few seat stay breakages while using those cases. So yeah, very lightweight case, and they're everywhere, and they're pretty good value, and they're very easy to pack. A lot good going for them, but I typically recommend the bigger, bulkier, more expensive Evoc road case personally for its protection.
Good to mention the road stuff too, because I would say even more so than the mountain bike, because of how everything is routed under the tape and through the bar, and there's almost no slack really of it, like allowable in the design of these bikes. You really have very limited ability to, if you were to remove the bar stem combo or whatever from the bike, to actually put it anywhere without doing, actual damage that you may not be able to salvage yourself upon arrival. So you definitely need to,
or having to disassemble it to a point that you might not be able to get it back together again.
Exactly. Yeah, I would say in these road bikes, or it's even in a tri bike especially, it's even I would say a bigger issue than with the mountain bike potentially, but it's still kind of the same thing where we've gotten bikes to a point where we kind of are looking for ways to figure out how to use them the way we want to. And I know I told you, Dave, that when I used to travel a lot, and when the occasion would arise where I could bring a bike, I actually had a bike that I kept. It was a rim brake road bike, mechanical, everything, separate bar and stem, totally analog, let's call it, that I kept just for traveling, because it was like 2016 and later. And so every bike was pretty much an integrated something or other that became quite a tedious undertaking to travel around, in addition to everything else I was traveling around with. So,
yep, it's a very good approach if you can afford to hold on to an old bike and have that rim brake bike as a spare. And then perhaps it's a bike you care a bit less about to throw into a bike case. And rim brake bikes are definitely easier to pack.
And typically easier to salvage if any little thing gets damage or something goes wrong. There's a much higher chance you can find a fix for it than you could if some electronic component was damaged, for example, or who you name it. But generally a little bit more friendly when it comes to salvaging it in the field. So just our 2 cents.
Yeah. All right. So the pick one was the Evoc Pro Road. It's got a longer name, but basically their road case, if you've got a road bike or gravel bike with an integrated cockpit. And then for mountain bike, you're suggesting the Evoc, what was it, Pro XL?
Yeah, I think it's just called the Pro XL, XL being like the size, and it's kind of the conventional Evoc bag, the quintessential one. It's like a nylon, kind of semi-soft, but well thought out and protected. But you got me thinking, though, I wonder what the bar width maximum is on the road going version, because I imagine it's probably not as wide as a mountain bike.
Less than some gravel bars.
Yeah, so... it would require the bike bag to be pretty unwieldy and huge if you had a mountain bike with the bars on without them turned somehow. Correct. Or else it would be extremely long with the bars turned. So it seems like that option probably is not realistic for a mountain bike, although it would be nice.
No, which is why they put road in the brand.
No doubt about it. Yeah. But just thinking out loud here. But if you do travel with a mountain bike and you haven't come up with this on your own yet, usually the easiest way is to remove the controls, shifter and brake lever and assembly from the handlebar itself, and pad those up well and secure them somehow so they're not just flopping in the bag. But that at least gives you some wiggle room and the ability to maybe just remove the handlebar completely, the bar and the stem completely, and to kind of stick it down below everything. And of course, some assembly is required on the back end, but usually that's what would get me there safely. So that's a little tip if you're doing some mountain bike travel.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, there you have it. I pick one. What's on our mind? Brad, should we jump to some Ask a Wrench questions?
Well, I love Ask a Wrench. Sometimes I've never even thought of this stuff before, and it just is exciting to then think about it later.
Let's listen to a question from Wes from Arizona.
Hi, my name is Wes from Tempe, Arizona, and I had a question on gravel bike tire clearance. I ride a 3T Explorer Race Max, which does not have clearance for larger tires beyond 42 millimeter on a 700C wheel, but I recently swapped to a 650B sized wheel, and now I run a 50 millimeter front tire and a 45 millimeter rear tire, and I don't really understand why more people do not do this to get around some of the tire clearance limitations. I guess why don't more people, when trying to get a larger tire clearance, run a smaller wheel size? Thanks.
All right, Brad, I think you have some opinions on this. I mean, you worked for a race team that notoriously stuck with 650B/27.5 wheels longer than any other professional in the mountain bike world. Why is 700 better?
700 is generally better for like the rolling resistance aspect of it, the efficiency of it. Even pro downhill bikes are, I would say, not 100%. They often run a mullet with like a smaller back wheel, but the larger wheel rolls over things a little bit better. But, there's options for a reason. And if you live in loose or dusty or sandy areas where you really need to maximize the contact patch with the ground, maybe more than any other variable. Wes's idea is not entirely off the mark at all. And a lot of brands actually advertise, their frame and wheel and tire clearances based on whether you're using a 700C versus a 650B wheel. Typically the 650 option will, you'll see a tire width of maybe 5 more millimeters wide than the 700 version for that frame. So exactly like what Wes is saying, that is an option.
And I guess it's not just an option; it's where gravel bikes came from.
Exactly, and
it was the stand. Like what Wes is suggesting there is quite literally what every brand in gravel was doing for a while. And the idea is that like your 650B with like roughly a 2-inch tire had the same external diameter as like roughly a 700 by 32 mil tire. So you could have this bike that was sort of had this road optimized geometry, but then with a change of wheels, you could take it off road with this wide, high volume tire. The thing is though, is that a lot of brands have moved away from this because the trend in racing and purely from an efficiency point of view that Brad kind of touched on is 700C is just in almost every situation is faster, more efficient. And that's why they're now trying to overcome this by just sticking with one wheel size and trying to sort of optimize for tire clearance and all that around that more efficient wheel size. But yeah, I mean, if you pick up any gravel bike from a previous generation, it's probably still going to advertise exactly what you're talking about, Wes. And it's something the industry's done already. But I guess out of that they've kind of decided that 700 is the better way forward, purely from a speed point of view. Yeah, so Wes, I mean, we've done it. People still do it. You'll still find people that love their 650B wheels and all that. Personally, I've been kind of an advocate of the move away from mixed wheel size bikes in gravel. I've been quite happy to see a lot of gravel bikes move to more 700C only design, and it's purely because there has to be a geometry compromise when you're designing for 2 wheel set sizes. They have to kind of assume a happy medium, and if you go to a 650B wheel, it tends to quicken up the handling a little bit because it is typically a smaller diameter. As a result of that, I tend to prefer to see gravel brands sort of optimize around a 700C wheel and sort of decide on what that width of tire is likely to be. The latest gravel bikes, a lot of them are doing geometry like bottom bracket height and trail figures and all that based around, say, like a 700 by 45 millimeter tire. So if you were to put your 650B wheel on that, and you can, but the diameter is going to be smaller, your bottom bracket height's going to be lower, you're going to get increased crank strike, the handling's going to be quicker. It's just not going to handle as well as the manufacturer intended. So that's where gravel bikes are heading at the moment. All right. Brad, should we move on to the last question?
Let's do it.
Let's hear a question from Greg, who's living in London.
Hi, geeks, both old and new. This is Greg. I'm in London, although you can probably tell I'm not actually from London. Anyway, my question is about tubeless wheels. I have a few sets that aren't going to get used a whole lot in the next few months as we transition into gross season in the UK, aka winter. It's not super cold, but it's wet pretty much all the time and cold enough to make riding miserable enough that I just am not going to do it. So my question is, how should I store the wheels that are set up as tubeless right now and they have sealant in them? What should I do to them to keep them from getting too gross or having any problems with them once it comes time to actually ride? We do occasionally get some, cold but nice days out here, so I would like to get out when I can and not have to worry too much about them. So any suggestions are more than welcome. Love the show. Thanks, everyone.
Brad, any tips for maintaining tubeless sealant over a long winter?
Well, yes, sort of. My advice would be to clean out your tires and leave them empty if you're not going to use them.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, unlike winterizing your car where you can put some things, some stabilizers or antifreezes or whatever the case is to kind of store your car for a long period of time and or in cold temperatures. There's nothing that I am aware of, Dave, that would really prolong a sealant's longevity. It's mostly a time equation, not a conditions, although temperature definitely is a variable. But in the case of a few months over the wintertime, I don't think any sealant really is reliably going to last that length of time, whether you're using it or not. Actually, I typically recommend 3 months as like the long interval if you're going to push it without having had any problems, flats, punctures, and you've just run the sort of lifespan of the sealant. I would say 3 months is really realistic. Beyond that, you're kind of taking your life into your own hands a bit because you might find yourself out there, get a puncture, and your sealant's all dried up or stuck in one spot on the inside of your tire and not doing anything to seal it. So my advice, and too, Dave, I'm sure you've experienced a wheel that you've left too long with old sealant in it, and it kind of cements itself to the rim a little bit more. It kind of glues itself in. It gets a little bit stuck. Yeah. Sometimes when they sit for too long and if they go flat, they kind of can sort of be quite difficult to actually remove from the rim. And then typically the sealant inside is nasty and also is quite difficult to remove from the tire. So if you have existing, freshish sealant, it's a tough one. I would go ahead, take your tire, open up everything, rinse it out with some water. If you want to leave the tire kind of half mounted to the rim, go for it. But I probably would advise not leaving the sealant over winter and just be prepared to refresh it when it's time to dust off the bike and ride in the spring. Yep.
Alternatively, just leave it in there and try spin the wheel every couple of weeks. Yeah. And won't be ideal, and you probably will need to top up that sealant when you next ride the bike. But it depends on how clean you want to keep this tire. It also really depends on the sealant you're using.
That's true.
Some sealants get really nasty. Others might just sort of dry up into a nice blob that you can really easily remove at a later date.
We this is getting into the weeds here, but we did some experiments back on a previous team I was involved with where we weighed tires after they'd been used for a little while, and they would absorb some sealant into them over time. They would gain weight. Even if you'd wipe them out and there wasn't like visible, residue in there, they would still, because tires are somewhat porous, and that's partially what the sealant's doing in the first place, is fixing the porosity and allowing no air to escape and filling it with something else. And so it would actually gain a little bit of weight too. So that's one reason I don't like leaving tires with sealant in them if I'm not using them.
Gotcha.
Okay. But that's a little bit of a theoretical thing that I would say is kind of more a me problem than it's like a you problem. But that's a thing. Sure. We tested that.
All right, Greg.
Yeah.
All right, Greg. Well, you've got options. You can either take it out, rinse it out with water, make it nice and clean, or you can leave it and try remember to spin it and top it up with air and have the sealant dry out a little bit, but potentially not be too detrimental. So there are options. And if you are planning to do any level of riding during the winter, I'd probably say for the faff of it, just leave the sealant in there.
Yeah.
But
anyway. Nothing bad permanently will happen. So that's the good news. No matter what, even if it dries up, it's salvageable and fine. So you're not going to like do damage to anything by.
It's not going to explode.
No.
Yeah.
Or eat anything up or corrode it. So whatever you want, Greg. Whatever you want.
Okay. All right. Well, Brad, I think that's a pretty great time to wrap it up. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
I guess quickly, if you want to submit a Ask a Wrench question, you can do so. First, you need to become a member of Escape Collective, which supports all the content we do and gives you access to all the content we do. Then head to escapecollective.com/hello. Introduce yourself, where you're from, and then ask the question. Just try to keep it brief, but we'll hopefully get to your question within the next week or two. All right. Well, yeah, Brad, same time next week?
Same time next week, and I'm hopeful that I get to hear a little bit more about your vacation. And the other part that you were there for.
And the little bit of work that I had to do.
Yes.
But yeah, mainly the vacation. Yeah. Well, I look forward to it. I've got some work to do between now and then, and some thoughts to put down on paper. So, well, actually on screen, but we'll get there. All right, Brad. Good chatting. We'll speak to you next week.
Until we meet again.